In three, two, one. All aboard! Welcome to the All Aboard podcast. I am your host, Brandon DeFreitas. I am here with two league members today. Welcome, Edwin and John. Thanks for joining the show again, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brando.
And
Glad to be back.
I appreciate you two pushing on me a little bit to get this one in before the trade deadline gets in the rearview mirror for us. But a lot of activity recently, and the playoff push is possibly mostly determined, but I think that was a pretty exciting trade deadline we just went through.
Oh yeah, for a while there, it looked like we weren't going to have any moves. It seemed like everybody was sort of happy with their teams, and there was rumblings that it was just going to be nothing, and then all of a sudden, it's like it took one, and the floodgates just kind of.
I know. I think Ben set the over under at 1.5. It's like, oh,
Mark
all
had a
morning I was on it. I was like actively reaching out for like 2-3 hours there. Nothing was really happening. And then it was just like late in the afternoon into the night. Yeah, from 3 p.m. on, it was crazy. There's actually time stamps on these trades, which is
Yep.
nice. But from 3 p.m. to like 11:40 p.m., they were just like,
Maybe a correlation of the half day from work and the drinks start flowing. Managers feel a little bit more bold.
Yeah, no, for sure.
yeah, get off of work.
That was
Travel plans are over.
We'll get into it too, but like Mark really drove the whole thing. I think Mark was in almost every trade except for like maybe one or two. So he came in with a plan and really made sure he was active all day.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, I'll pull it up. We'll go trade by trade and we'll go from there. So
Sounds good.
let's see. Share screen. Alrighty. And I believe you guys can see the trade screen now, right?
Yep.
All good.
Perfect. Awesome. I'll do a little one more zoom in here. But we should be good. All right. Well, first off, I guess we'll start off with the Foster Moreau trade. If you look at the timestamps, we have November 6th, but the deadline was November. It wasn't the 21st, it was the 23rd. But we'll start
Yes.
off. Foster Moreau traded for $15 a fab between us. The trade was so insulting to Foster Moreau, they don't even show the fab here on the trade screen.
Just giving Foster Moreau away. I think, didn't you drop him?
So that's the funny part is I proceeded to drop him because I got too excited with my trades and forgot the roster size limits, and then we came to set the lineup, and I had too many injuries and I just needed to make room. But it was $15 fab trade at the time. Zach Ertz out for the year now, so we're looking for some replacement, and Moreau with a little play with Waller being out. I figured, I'm like, all right, maybe he'll be the replacement for a couple weeks. Had to drop him. I actually picked him back up now. So status quo there for my team, really.
He did score a touchdown.
Yeah, that's the
Your
other
thinking was right. The process was right.
I believe you actually spent another dollar, so you're up to $16 a fab invested in Foster Moreau.
It's a pricey investment for just a substitute
Didn't he
tight
get
end.
picked up earlier in the year too for fab?
Yep.
He might have.
Cumulative fab spent on Foster Moreau.
Yeah.
He's on Edwin's team. You can see the history and everything.
Oh yeah.
Oh, is he in your starting lineup?
Now he is.
Oh, nice.
It's a scary place. I lost Ertz. Higbee is useless. Taysom Hill was my big play early in the season, and very, very hit or miss. So I'm like, if Moreau can give me 5 points, I guess I'll live with that.
He's 25.
Free agent after the year. And I think that was part of what we talked about, Edwin, too.
Yep.
It was like not necessarily just a this year thing, but I did feel bad that week because I told you at the end of the week, I was like, you might be over the roster limit, Edwin. You're going to have to do something here.
Yeah, which I figured if I was over the roster limit, but I had my lineup set, it was fine. But of course, I'll abide by the league rules and ended up cutting them. Had to be compliant. Don't want to rock the boat here.
We always appreciate that. We could probably move on from that one. More just interesting that with fab trading a little bit more frequent, like maybe it helps teams like, come to agreements or just push a trade over the edge is sort of what you're hoping for.
Yep, get creative.
All right, the next trade, and I want to hear what you guys have to say here because Mark and I definitely discussed this at the time, and this would have probably been a better day of discussion since Darnell Mooney's now out for the season. But Mark's first trade, trying to get some receiver depth, acquires Darnell Mooney and Paris Campbell in exchange for Mac Jones and a third-round pick. And JaMycal Hasty was in there. That was more of just to make the numbers work, so we won't even include him. But I'll just open the floor up to you guys. What do you think of that one when it came through? And of course, looking at it in the lens of not the Darnell Mooney injury we know now.
I think I texted you right after, and I was like, I like that trade for you. You're buying low on Mac, who has looked terrible at times this year, but he's still young. He's still theoretically a starter for this year and 2 more years. And meanwhile, you're giving up Mooney, who's an attractive asset,
Right.
and Paris Campbell, who's coming off a few good games. But I think I said that I liked your end of it better just because you got Mac. So,
Yeah, in addition to that, with Paris, the whole Colts offense right now this season just so tough to predict. So I think you're getting a young QB. Went to the playoffs last year, and Patriots have just been disappointing, but QBs are hot commodity. So any young QB that looks capable, I think it's always a good plus. I think that the biggest thing for Mark is obviously with Mooney. You hate to see it out for the year immediately. Didn't get any return on that. I do like that pickup long term though. He's only 25, so if Fields and the Bears can somehow gel and kind of get that together, I do think that's a solid pickup. He's demonstrated a lot of talent. It's just been unfortunate the Bears just haven't been able to use him. So I think for even if I think you guys both benefit. It helped without Mooney being out for the year, it helped Mark get some of that flex depth. Guys that maybe he can rotate into those forced flex spots, and then he didn't seem too QB needy, which now may be a mistake when Stafford just kind of being out for the year. Now he faces he may have to start Andy Dalton, who he picked up later on. So that was the big risk on his part, not having enough QB depth to rotate potentially for the playoff run.
well, on the other side of it, with Zach Wilson losing his job, Brandon needed that QB3.
Yeah.
And he got it. Immediately, Mac goes out, scores 27 on Thanksgiving. Huge.
Yep.
And then even this past game when the Patriots were a disaster, he put up 14-15. So
Yeah, we'll highlight one thing though for JaMycal Hasty. So was he just proceeded to be dropped after? Is that what happened with this? Because I know
Yep.
then it looked like he took over or at least getting some play now. Has a role actually on the offense, and he had a pretty solid week. Not entirely sure what's going to happen there with the Jacks going forward, but he put up 18 points, which in hindsight, then it's like RBs are so valuable. So anytime you can get someone that has a role, big boost there. But then the drop after kind of negates a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of just remember back when we did that. ETN was getting all the work.
Yep.
ETN gets hurt to start that game, and then I actually was going to keep Hasty, and then they signed Darrell Henderson off waivers.
Yep.
So I was like, Hasty's not even the backup anymore. Lo and behold, you drop him and he becomes gold for John B. So, fantasy football in a nutshell, right?
John B, who has ATN, savvy move by him for that handcuff.
Savvy pickup. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't blame you for dropping Hasty. It's not like he was demonstrating anything really, so I definitely understandable. And he's 26, so it's not like he's spring chicken. So I understood there. But it's one of those things, I guess, it negates the Mooney loss for Mark, Hasty loss for you. So it kind of whittles down to a third, and Mac Jones or Paris Campbell. And definitely more value there.
Mooney's not long term, so it's not like an ACL, so
Right. Yeah.
he'll be
Yeah.
fine for next year.
And part of the equation too, Campbell, like Moreau, is a free agent, and you never know. Like, I don't think Christian Kirk is that much more talented than Paris Campbell. I don't know if that's a fair comp, but like you could see a team, signing him to a contract and giving him a role next year.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Paris Campbell strikes me as like one of those like Giants receivers that just kind of like they just rotate through guys that all kind of show promise, and then you just never know who you really can trust for the full season.
Well, and apologies, I'm eating a little snack while we're on here. Always got to make sure you're snacking. We could probably quickly do the next one, a swap of backup tight ends, Tyler Conklin, Evan Ingram, between me and Mark. In fact, this was the first trade, 11:40 a.m. So that's really the big thing to highlight here, the timing. The first trade comes in, Mark and I make a joke here. And really, I think the big comment Mark had was, Ben underestimates how much we like trash. And you know what? Trading for a little trash, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. Both have upside, both have a role right now.
Yes, more than you can say for a lot of tight ends, really. I think anybody that can maybe give you more than 5 points on a consistent basis nowadays is at the tight end position you take. Not all of us can have Travis Kelce like John.
You've been shopping Ingram all season, Brando, so bet you were happy to get him off your hands.
I just thought with the quarterback switch, I thought Conklin showed a little bit of ability, and unfortunately, he's my boy only because he's on my team. But unfortunately, Zach Wilson is just terrible. So I'm like, if with the quarterback switch, maybe Conklin gets more involved. Was my thought process.
Yeah,
Well,
that's what it is.
let's go to the first big trade, and this one I actually missed. I was having lunch, and I checked it an hour later. I'm like, holy crap, I missed this trade. John enters the fray, trades his 2025 second round pick, so a few years out, and invests in Demarcus Robinson and Isaiah Spiller. Spiller, who was a second rounder, mid-second rounder in our past draft. So I thought this was pretty good value for you, John.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's insurance for Eckler. And it's a second round pick, which is like Brandon mentioned, is you're getting the value there. It's not like you're overpaying for that insurance, and Spiller's only I was gonna mention he's only 21, so who knows? That's the thing with these running backs is the youth goes a long way. You never know if Eckler's gonna get dinged up, and all of a sudden you have Spiller already. You're locked and loaded for the playoff run.
Bite your tongue. Eckler's fine.
No, he is. I have him in
I'm
redraft,
kidding.
so I
I'm
hope
kidding.
I hope for the same. So
No, but yeah, Mark actually approached me about this, and he was like, "Do you want Spiller for Eckler?" He's like, "I'll take a second for him." It's like, well, I don't have anything till 2025, and he said he would do that straight up.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, considering he was just a second, that's not a bad deal for me, but I need an asset that I can use right now. And so I was trying to get Slayton from him on the Giants. I just lost Wandale, which kills me. Not kills me, but hurts. And so then he was like, well, you can have one of these 4 wide receivers on my bench. And I picked Robinson.
The
He was
platter.
just coming off of that 17-point game.
yeah.
I was like, oh, nice. Get a little stack with Lamar. And of course, he comes out and throws up a complete dud. Bad matchup this week. So he might be nothing. But even if it was just Spiller for the second, I'd still feel okay about it. If Spiller turns into nothing, whatever, that pick's in 2.5 years. So,
Yep.
so yeah, I'm fine with it. If I can get any production out of Robinson this year, I'll be very happy with it. If not, took a chance. Meanwhile, Mark's trying to get some more draft capital back for that shopping spree he was going to go on later in the day. So
that was going to be my one comment is Mark was probably just like, you know what? I don't really care. I'm about to do a whole flurry of trades. I just need to get something in my stash now before he went on.
And he traded his 2025 something to John B earlier in the season in that Chase Edmonds,
Rashad
Penny. Yep. So I think it was a good trade for both sides.
Agreed. Well, that came in at 11:56, so a little back to back on Mark. And John, this was your point. You were saying you were reaching out to people all morning, not much activity. All of a sudden at 3:20, and I can imagine with kids too, it's less predictable when you can get on here. This is where the shopping spree started to go out of hand here at 3:20. Mark back to back makes deals with Jimmy, and then Jimmy and Ben make a deal. So at first, Mark trades 2 third-round picks in the upcoming draft for Raheem Mostert.
Yep. So I would say I think the way Mark dealt this trade deadline, he would come to me, would say like, "Hey, I will do XYZ. I may have this lined up. So if I can make this deal, then I'll make this deal." So I think he was very much having like an insurance policy on his trades to make sure that if he was going to give up something, he had something coming his way. So it was very, very savvy on his part. You know, he was
Yeah.
just willing to make the trade happen, but had something else lined up.
Yeah.
Um,
He likes to be on multiple lines when he's making trades. All right, you'll give me this. Hold on.
yep.
Picks up the other. That's the
Mhm.
Mark trading method. It's good.
Yeah, I guess what are your thoughts on getting Mostert?
So this was interesting because you almost need to look at both trades. So he trades 2/3 for Mostert, and then oh, actually no, that's from Jimmy's perspective. So Jimmy gets rid of Mostert for 2/3, then trades a second for Jeff Wilson. And it's tough because looking here at Raheem Mostert, like he was really valuable at this point in the season when he was like the guy, like 15, 18 carries, 14, 16, 14. And then as soon as they get Jeff Wilson, 47% of snaps, 9 carries, 28% of snaps, 8 carries. And he's hurt and misses the last game. So
Right.
I like Mostert. It's not a bad trade for 2/3, but I do think there's a little concern here that Jeff Wilson is the top dog in that backfield. And then Jimmy ends up going from 2/3 to
Second.
in a second. So he loses a second, recoups 2/3, and has a much better piece. So I do like
Yeah.
it a lot from Jimmy's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously the age is a factor too of Mostert. Like, you know, this is just an in-season value, if anything, when he did have the role. Now it's very much up in the air, aging out. Not sure if you could even use him next season. So it's you know, I can understand it from trying to just get more flex depth.
Yeah.
Because I think that's probably what Mark's thought process was. I just want to get, you know, someone I can plug in there so that, you know, we have such deep lineups that I that's kind of the mindset I have. Some of the deals I made later on, we'll talk about those, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. He was just like, you know what, I just get more flex depth, doesn't cost me too much, you know, 2/3, just making the deal happen. From Jimmy's side, like you said, I think that was very astute on his part, because he's locking in the guy that seems to have the role, and, you know, was able to get the aging vet off his plate, get some more pick, get that draft capital in there.
Not to mention that second is theoretically going to be a bottom 5 in the second.
Yeah.
So takes the 2/3, turns those into a second, or vice versa. Sorry.
Yeah. Bottom
Yeah.
of the third round looks like mine and Mark. So
True.
2 playoff teams.
That's true.
But yeah, Jeff Wilson is a pretty useful player, and I thought he was the big buy for Jimmy. I mean, it was really the only buy, but you look at what he's done since he's gone to Miami, and it's like, first of all, talk about luck this season for Jeff Wilson for Ben. Like, this guy had no value entering the season, practically no value.
So annoying.
And Elijah Mitchell goes down, and Ben rides Jeff Wilson for these weeks. He loses his role. They get Christian McCaffrey, only to be traded
He's
to the
worthless.
Dolphins and get another role.
Right.
Like, holy cow! Like,
he was resurrected twice in 1
yeah,
year. It's like,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. And that's the stuff in Dynasty you can't predict. And just hope you're on the right end of it.
Yeah.
he's Merrick Dondarrion. He just keeps getting resurrected.
Yeah,
Pretty
we'll
much.
highlight Jeff Wilson is, you know, like based on the footballers half PPR rankings, he's ranked ahead of, for this week's matchup at least, guys like Singletary, DeAndre Swift, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, AJ Dillon, Kareem Hunt. These are all guys that had a lot of buzz depending on, you know, where you drafted them in redraft, for example. just goes to show like Jeff Wilson is coming out of nowhere and outranking some guys that people definitely drafted in redraft and definitely went in top 7-8 rounds. And Jeff Wilson's just a free agent waiver wire fodder
Yeah.
addition that Ben was able to cash in on.
But I'm
So
surprised Ben traded him. He's a contender.
that was
Yeah.
the next element, John,
Sure.
where I question it is yes, Ben adds another second, and he's been very much in the rebuild. But you look at Ben's draft capital, and he has a ton this season. He has more picks in this upcoming draft than he's realistically going to have roster spots. And my one question is, I understand he thinks he's going to build a super team and compete in future seasons. That's great. But you can't always predict that. Like, look at Alex's team, which would be like a top 3 team in our format, gets a bunch of injuries. Like, if I'm Ben, I just happen to have a lot of things go my way this year, virtually no injuries, guys like Jeff Wilson emerging. I think I ride the Jeff Wilson train and just see what happens in the playoffs as opposed to getting a late second round pick in return.
Right. Agreed. I think the win now, and then coupled with Gabe Davis, another flexible starting flex type guy, it was an interesting move. I know he has a plan, but I prefer winning now as opposed to drafting later. Ben could still win, but if he loses his playoff game by 6 points, he'll probably be kicking himself for trading away some of these guys. We'll see.
Yeah. And on the flip side, Jimmy, just looking scary, adding that is just making more and more of a complete team.
Yeah, Jimmy's dangerous. John, though, currently in the driver's seat for a bye week. We'll see how it goes, but shaking his head that I even mentioned it on the podcast.
It's so fraudulent. I think I literally think I have the least points against. I've been very lucky this year in certain ways.
Hey, ride it out, man.
My players are just taking injuries left and right. It's crazy.
I feel that pain.
You never hear Will Tam saying that in baseball, so just ride the wave when you have it.
We'll see.
So we'll get into now the next one here between another Mark trade. So we had a little Jimmy Ben right in there back to back, but Mark's back in the action, recoups a 2023 second for Cam Akers. And I'll just throw out from the top, and I'm sorry, Edwin, I thought this was an overpay for Cam Akers, a player who has youth on his side. I could bring it up here. I think he's still like 24 or something, but
he's 23. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole Achilles injury scares me, and I just feel like he's had every opportunity to show that he still has it and hasn't really. So I'm going to call him cooked. I think he's cooked, and I thought it was a little bit of an overpay, but I can understand it for the depth for sure.
The Achilles isn't a total death sentence, but it might take another year or two. Look at Donta Foreman. I think he's kind of like best case scenario where he was a like hype prospect for the Texans, killing it, tore his Achilles. It took him like 3 years to get back, and now he's dominating. So I don't think it's over. And Cam Akers is in like a year and a half into that timeline, so maybe middle of next season. Doesn't help that the Rams are a trash team right now.
Yeah, I think definitely. I was willing to just get the trade done for some depth. At the time, it was the week the news broke of Henderson getting cut. So I'm like, well, hey, he's gonna get work. The Rams are terrible, but I was just looking for someone that would be useful somewhat. But looks like right now no one can be trusted on that team. And Kyron Williams looks to be taking over potentially. And I to John's point, I kind of acknowledge the injury could be at play, and I'm just somewhat hopeful that maybe he came back last year and kind of showed that, but like maybe he wasn't really quite ready to do so. And with another year under his belt, assuming he can finish out the year, hopefully, age 24, maybe finds himself a different role, can still get some value there. And I'm not to jinx myself, but I'm hoping my second round pick would maybe be 17, 18, 19, 20, which that could be a hit or miss depending there. So I just figured I'm like, all right, let's just try to go for it now, get some of that depth in there.
That's the tough part. Everybody values these picks so differently,
Mm-hmm.
and it depends on what phase of your team's trajectory you're in. So it's interesting.
I probably came on a little too strong, but I did like the move for Mark getting a second for Akers. But
Yeah.
it does highlight for me these guys like Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins. Like sometimes as fans, we get annoyed when the players try to get theirs. And I know Edwin's always been like, no, you got to side with the players. But that's one of the reasons. Like these guys don't get paid much out of college, and both Akers and Dobbins look promising. You suffer some serious injuries, and then maybe you don't make much money in your career. Like you got to cash in when you can cash in as a professional athlete.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can speak to that with even Javonte Williams, lost him out for the year, and
Mhm.
obviously tough hit for me, but still hopeful that some of these young RBs can kind of step back up next year. We'll see.
Well, that came in at 736, and we get to the second fab trade, the Melvin Gordon for $15. That's my going rate for fab trades, you know.
No more
um,
than 1 minute later.
yeah. So Mark and I had this on the table, and he said if he got a roster spot, he would do this trade. And that's sort of what was the delay on this one. We don't need to spend much time on it. Just another, moving around a roster spot. Basically, Gordon gets signed by Kansas City, so at least a marginally interesting landing spot there, and bottom of the roster type depth player.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. Which
Fab
the only thing I
budgets
will say
running
about
out.
this, not to delay us more, is just I don't understand what Denver was doing, splitting the work with Gordon and Javonte. Just seeing the outcome of where Melvin Gordon ended up this year,
Yeah.
like what? Why? Just give the ball to Javonte, make it happen. Uh,
In,
very
in in
frustrating.
slight Melvin Gordon defense, I think he played better last year.
Yeah,
Like the PFF grades and efficiency numbers last year were not as good as Javante, but they were still like in the ballpark. Versus this season, like Gordon just fell off a cliff.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Should have been Javonte's year.
I
Yeah, that was a
think
tough
it was going
blow,
to be,
tough break early on.
without a doubt. I do think he would have gotten the majority of the work, and that whole Denver team, what a disaster.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's some trade targets I was eyeing in Denver, and then just kind of wait for the season to play out, and I'm just like, ooh, glad I didn't do that.
Well, we get to this next one, and Edwin, I took a shot at you earlier with the Cam Akers. I thought this was one of your best work right here. Um, I this is tough to unpack here because you got. I mean, do we even mention Keelan Granson, Malik Davis? Both have since been dropped, so it's really a second and a third. The seconds in 24, third and 23 for Allen Robinson and Kareem Hunt. And I thought this was a great buy-in for you, Edwin, because even though Allen Robinson might be on the downside of his career, he hasn't had the season we thought. There, and maybe he's done. I just thought for Kareem Hunt, it was a great buy because this is a player that he's behind Nick Chubb, but he's a free agent this coming year. And if he ends up in a position where he can get the majority of the work, I think his value is higher than a second round pick for sure. So I thought Tam panicked a little bit and was trying to move these guys and get some future assets. Whereas I would have held Hunt if I were him, waited for him to sign somewhere and capitalize on that hype. But that was just my thought. And I thought a really good trade for you here, Edwin.
Welcome, John Stotts.
I didn't know if you
Oh,
were going to retort or respond. No, I agree. I know Tam was shopping Hunt for a first, so he settled a little bit, like you said, panic settled. And then Allen Robinson for a late third isn't a bad trade. I think he's another guy who has since gone on IR,
yep.
season ending. Meanwhile, Hunt didn't get traded at the NFL trade deadline, and they just aren't using him for some reason. It's bizarre.
Nick
This
Chubb's just
offense could
better.
totally change tomorrow. Deshaun Watson's back. So you bought there, which I like. I think
Yep.
I'm okay with it on both sides. I think it's good. Tam wants the assets. Doesn't want Allen Robinson anymore. He's sick of waiting for a Nick Chubb injury. Sorry, Brando. And but for you, Hunt, if that does happen, or if they start using him, that's good flex depth. And for
Yep.
next year, what is he like 27? So
Yep. Yep.
he
So
doesn't have a ton of miles. So
I think I don't view it as a as Brandon said to Tam, you got fleeced. I think it was I understood where he was coming from, just
fair.
trying to get some draft capital, start getting some of the younger players back on the fold. And there, Hunt has had just really a down year for how involved he was, and I knew his value had just kind of been depleted this year with just the performance. So I figured, I'm like, okay, a second rounder can get him in there with that flex depth. And then the Allen Robinson, I was again just looking for someone to plug into the flex spots. And I know everybody has had injuries, and I'm definitely not making any excuses or anything. I just figured I lost Harris, Ertz, Williams, and then Myers has been like forever questionable. So he's out like a couple of weeks, and then
Just got smoked.
yeah, it just was like a lot of guys out at once, and I was so just desperate to get some guys I can put in just to get a feel the full lineup. I even got some trade offers for some guys, and I just couldn't ship them because I was just like, I can't. I
Yeah.
may not have enough guys. Like Devontae Adams was looking at the whole camera shoving incident, and I was like, what if he gets suspended? So at the time, I was looking at Allen Robinson has had obviously a tough year, and before the injury I figured, I'm like, hey, if I can get someone that can give me a safe floor, maybe it being the guy if Stafford was there without Cup, that's kind of how I thought about it too. But obviously now he's out for the year, so kind of getting nothing there. So right now it's from the trades I've had, really just looks like Hunt is the one that can maybe give me some value back for the playoff run, which I'm hopeful with the QB change. Maybe they get him involved in the passing work at least, because Chubb's just kind of
Yeah.
taken over.
Yeah, I do
And
think
Robinson is useful for next year, still under contract. I think he has a big deal. So like the Rams aren't getting rid of him. So I think it was a good move. And filling those last two flex spots with all the injuries that are piling up is not easy. So I agree with you there.
you have to remember too, like we didn't know about the injury when you made the trade and when I
Yeah.
made the fleeced comment. Um, and like you said, without Cooper Cup, if you look at it, he started to like get a little bit more work in the last two games. When I thought he had a chance to be the primary guy, maybe maybe move a little bit inside too. So with Cup out, so I really liked that at the time of the trade. But yeah, since with Allen Robinson on IR now, it's like okay, maybe it looks like a little bit more even trade than it did at the time.
Yeah, I will say with the additional the TE and Malik Davis that I added on there, that was a Tam savvy move. He was just like, hey, looks like you're gonna be over the roster limit. You want to just throw in some of those guys you're gonna cut? So, it looks like since then they've been cut as well. But just want to note that Tam's just a savvy owner.
I think it's fine for both teams. But similar to Ben, I'm kind of wondering why Tam's selling. He's in the playoff hunt. He kind of just like gave up almost. I think he's 5-7, right?
He's actually the reason that we can't say the playoffs are completely locked in
Right.
because he
He's
mathematically could catch Mark. He's a game and a half behind Mark, the game being one
yeah,
game
five
back
and
and the half
seven.
game the points for.
And he is playing you this week, Brando, which doesn't look great for him, but I don't know. He's a very patient fantasy manager and he's aggressive at the right times.
No.
So I think he's just like, yep, not my year. I'm not going to win. I don't have that patience. I'm just like, yeah, fucking try to win right now. So props to Tam for keeping with the I guess he's rebuilding, sort of. I don't
I
know.
I think what changed his season was the Brees Hall injury.
Yeah.
When he had Brees Hall, his team was like producing. It had the ability to put up points. He was winning games. He could have been in the Ben tier, I think, on the weaker type playoff teams, and I'm gonna come back to regret that comment when Ben beats my ass week 1 of the playoffs. But
Ben wins the league. It's gonna be so funny.
regardless, I think he was in it, and then once Brees got hurt, like we even put it in the power rankings. We're like, Tan doesn't have the depth to replace this. He's gonna be in a little bit of trouble. So definitely can understand that from his perspective.
And behind Ben, Tam might have the most draft capital. He's got a lot of picks.
Good point.
4 this year, 5 or 6 next year. So
Travers has a lot. I know John B has a lot. Travers has 2 lottery picks likely in this year's draft, so that's pretty valuable.
And John B, of course, he's got a lot there. I think he has the actual most picks.
Oh, does he?
Well, no.
I stand corrected.
No, I think it's definitely Ben. I just looked at that again.
Yeah, nobody touches Ben, but actually, yeah, John B's probably close.
Well, Ben has the 4 first rounders. This is not even looking at his seconds. He has 4 first rounders this year, and he's acquired 3 for next year. So, well, he has 3 including his own next year. So he's loading up on the draft capital, and a lot of them have worked out for him. So
yeah,
I know I bought Brandon Cooks, but unfortunately, it's like
get to that next.
Yeah,
Gabe Davis.
Yeah, we do have Gabe Davis next. We have 2 minutes on the clock. So we probably, if you guys want to do a quick part 2, we could. The only downside here is it's going to take about 20 minutes to process. So I don't know what the time frame is. Got a couple of dads on the line, so I don't know if you guys can wait out a 20-minute intermission.
So we shoot. Yeah, we shoot for it, I guess. We have a minute left.
All right. Well, yeah, with only a minute left, it probably wouldn't be enough time to cover this trade. So we'll wrap it up now, give it a little bit less time to process, and we'll be back with part 2, and we'll touch on the Gabe Davis trade, and then we may as well also just touch on the playoffs a little bit. We'll keep that section quicker for you, Edwin. I know a lot of responsibilities. All right. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate part 1. We'll be back in part 2 in a little bit.
Cool.
That's good.
Bye.
All right.